Welcome to the lecture 11 of Grid and Cloud Computing of Unit 2. In this lecture, we'll discuss about the inter-cloud resource management. So you already know there are various cloud service providers are there. So whenever there is a resource scarcity is there, whenever the demand is more and the capacity is less, there one cloud service provider can connect with another cloud service provider in order to provide services, right? So in this section, we'll see how one cloud is interfaced with another cloud and how they are managing the resources. So earlier I told you there are three layers of services. There are three services we already discussed. That is first one, that is called as infrastructure as a service, which is bottom layer. Next, above the infrastructure layer, you have a platform as a service layer. And the top layer is your software as a service layer, right? Like we are using our Flickr we are using or Gmail we are using, that is called as a software as a service, right? So in this section, we'll see there are total number of layers, there are 6 layers. So in addition to this infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, there is another 3 layers. One is called as your location as a service called LAAS. Next one is called network as a service, that is NAAS. The last one is called as hardware as a service, HAAS, right? So in addition to the IAS PASAs, here we introduced there are 3 layers. Okay, location as the name suggests. So it is specified that in which location the data center is available, right? Network points to virtual local area network. You know that the computers are connected in local area network in an institute or in a hostel, right? To share the information, share the various files, right? So here the area service uses virtual local area networks, right? The last one is called the hardware as a service. Services, right? But the main constant storage infrastructure for anything you require compute and storage infrastructure to be there, right? So without the compute and storage infrastructure, it is not possible to provide various services, right? And one cannot launch any kind of applications like that Gmail or any kind of applications we are using various services. So these are possible by the help of your infrastructure as a service. So one cannot launch the software as a application with a cloud platform. Without a cloud platform, it is not practically possible to deploy a software as a service applications, right? So generally, in earlier cases also, I told you about infrastructure as a service is nothing but your data as a service and as a communication as a service. So you can say these are the 2 sub layers of your infrastructure as a service. In the next slide, I will tell you how these 6 layers are interfaced. So if you see here, the top layer is close to the user, that is your software as a service. Then next to software as a service, you have platform as a service. Then your infrastructure as a service, which is divided into your storage as a service or communication as a service, and followed by your location as a service, network as a service, and hardware as a service. And who is providing which type of services? Like Amazon AWS, the very popular Amazon Web Services, right? It is providing your infrastructure as a service, right? Force.com is providing platform as a service. Salesforce.com is providing software as a services. So these are the arrangements with respect to these 6 layers and their providers. Another difference you can also see here with respect to different cloud players, how IaaS is different from PaaS and how PaaS is different from a software as a service. How you can compare with respect to cloud players. So if you see here, you know that there is a service level agreement you need to sign as a user. It is a contract between the user and the cloud service provider. So if you see here, that IT administrator and cloud provider, if you see, IaaS is responsible to monitor the service level agreement. Whatever service level agreement you have signed with the cloud service provider, so this IT administrator or cloud provider is responsible. Essentially, IaaS is responsible to monitor the SLA. Platform as a service is responsible for monitor the SLA as well as enable the service platforms. This is the additional responsibility added within platform as a service. Similarly, software as a service, it is also monitoring the SLA and also deploying various softwares, right? Like Gmail applications or any software applications you want to use. So that you have to specify in the software as a services. Like that, you can compare what is the responsibility of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, and in addition to that, you can compare location as a service, network as a service, and hardware as a service. Now, if you come to the cloud players, as I mentioned, there are various cloud players are there. If you see here, there are three cloud players are there. One is called is IT administrator or the provider who is providing, like Amazon is providing, Microsoft is providing. They are coming in under this IT administrator. The second one is called a software developer, right? So every organization has a software developer. Both provider also need software developer. User also need some software developer in order to develop any kind of software, or it may be an interface software, it may be any kind of specific software, right? And the last one is end user. So these three peoples are called as the cloud players. One is your IT administrator or the cloud service provider. We call it CSP. Second one is your software developer. Third one is your end user. End user is nothing but a customer, right, or a client. Or if you are using Gmail, then you are called as end user, right? So every cloud service provider maintains a software stack, right? That architecture is they are calling it a software stack, right? So if you see, if you arrange in the form of a stack, you know in data structure also there is a stack, right? Stack concept. If you see the stack, the bottom one and the top one, if you compare, so here they are saying the lower layer is not completely transferred to the upper layer, right? Whichever layer is there, whichever element is there in the bottom, in the software stack, the lower layer, whatever things are there, that may not be visible to the top layer, obviously, because the bottom layer, as you know in cloud computing, that the hardware is called as a bottom layer, like infrastructure as a service, but the top layer is your software as a service, right? So user should not know that user not interested to know that what is the complexity of this particular infrastructure, right? And I also told you about single system image. Single system image enables the user, right? User treat the system as a single system. That's why the upper layer and lower layer, if you see, that is not completely transparent. If it is completely transparent, then user can see the infrastructure as a service or hardware or anything user can see, right? Okay. Next, what kind of runtime support services are there? So you know that in cloud, it is consist of several clusters, right? It is having various clusters, right? If clusters are there, so once you are dividing your work into multiple parts, one part can be assigned to a particular cluster, right? So there should be a cluster monitor to monitor which computer is working, whichever node is participating in the cluster, whether they are running mode or whether they are in waiting mode or whether they are in the idle mode. Everything will be taken care by this cluster monitoring things, right? So we can collect runtime status, whether a computer is busy or a computer is idle or whether its computer is switch off. Everything will be taken care by the cluster monitoring, right? Another thing is that there is a cluster job management because multiple users are accessing cloud, right? As multiple users are accessing the cloud, so there should be some job management. Which request is requested first, which request came late, okay, which request require urgent attention. Everything will be managed by this your cluster job management. So it is keeping track of many users and distributing their work to various clusters, right? So obviously there should be a scheduler is there, like you know that round robin algorithm. There is also a scheduler or operating system you have studied, short term scheduler, medium term scheduler, long term scheduler. The idea of scheduler is moving the job from one part to another part, right? So if you see here, that this scheduler is nothing but the queue of tasks, right? A set of tasks are placed in a queue, right? For example, task 1 is in the first, task 2 in the second, and task 3 in the third position. Like that, they are maintained in a queue, and each task is assigned with a processing node. This processing node is nothing but a part of your cluster, right? According to the node availability. Whatever nodes are available in a cluster, so this scheduler is assigning the work to those processing nodes, right? So there are two views. One is your customer side, and another is the provider side. What customer thinks? Customer side, it should be no upfront commitment. You should not say that irrespective of your resource use, you will charge this one, right? Or customer may not specify how many servers are required. I told you in serverless computing, right? So no need of any upfront commitment in the server or software licensing. These are not taken care by the customer, right? it should be the responsibility of the cloud service provider to provide the services. So if you come to the provider side, what provider should see? Provider should be see that cost should be as low as possible, so that customers will be attracted to a particular cloud service provider, right? So with conventional hosting of the user applications, so providers should host the customers applications, and the cost of that deploying that application should not be high, right? If the cost is high, the customer may not attract to a particular cloud service provider. So in order to provision the computing resources, you know that everything is provided in the form of virtual machines, right? So before provision a particular virtual machine, what you need to sign in a service level agreement. Service level agreement is nothing but the contract between the provider and your end user, right? So while you are providing, why your SLA is required? Because whenever a resource is given to a particular customer, so that resource may be under provision. The total number of resources, whatever you are giving to your client, it may be under provision. It may be over provisioned also. Okay. If it is under provision, what happens? Whatever SLA you have signed, the SLA is violated or the SLA is broken. Whatever condition you have enforced, that is violated, right? So you can impose penalties on the cloud service provider, right? On the other hand, if sufficient resource is given to the user, then what happens? User may not use all the resources, so resource underutilization will happen, right? So you have to think that whatever resources you are, whenever you are provisioning the resources to the customer, it should not be under provisioned or it should not be over provisioned, right? So here it comes a challenging problem. The main challenging problem is how efficiently we can provision the resources to the customer, so that there should not be over provision, the resources should not be over provision. So it depends upon various factors. The factors are nothing but first factor is saying unpredictability of customer consumer demand. Many users don't know how many servers are required or how many resources are required to execute their work, right? Like Flipkart, they are launching big billion day, so they may not predict that how many customers will visit to their website. So there is completely unpredictability is there. So it may happen that sometimes there is a software failure or a hardware failure, right? It may happen that the resources are heterogeneity. Resource heterogeneity means the resources of a single one server is completely different from another server. One server may be highly capable, another server may be low capable, right? So that is called your heterogeneity of services. Or if you see power management, power taken by different resources are also different, or there may be a conflict in the signed service level agreement, because SLA is generally prepared by your cloud service provider, right? Service level agreement is signed by your CSP, right? It is framed by CSP. Only user need to sign it, right? So user may not know the many technical terms, so there may be a conflict in the service level agreement. So these are the challenging things whenever you are provisioning the resources. Okay. So next is if you come to specific cloud service provider. For example, let us see Amazon EC2, right? Or you go for IBM's Blue Cloud. So in IBM's Blue Cloud, there is a virtual machine monitor. So VMM, what is the use of VMM? VMM is creating the virtual machine. VMM is able to know that what is the status of that virtual machine. VMM takes care everything about a particular virtual machine. So these cloud service provider, if you see, they are using XEN. XEN is a VMM. I told you about VMware, right? VMware is also a virtual machine monitor. K virtual machine is also a virtual machine monitor. But XEN is used by Amazon EC2, right? So whenever you want to use Amazon EC2, you want to deploy a particular virtual machine, some predefined virtual machine template is there, right? I'll tell you how this template is look like. Like whenever you are writing a particular project report also, you are asking your senior, can you give me a template or last year report? So by looking into that template, you can design your own thing, right? But many cloud service providers are there. They are not providing any kind of template. Like if you go for IBM uses your XEN as a virtual machine monitor, but there is no VM template. User cannot take a particular template to provision a particular virtual machine or to create a particular virtual machine. Okay, so if you go to these providers with respect to the provisioning, as I mentioned, it is over provisioning or under provisioning, and what we need constant provisioning, because over provisioning lead to resource wastage, under provisioning leads to loss of both user and provider. That's why we need constant provisioning. So in the next slide, I will show you one diagram so that the idea is more clear. See this diagram. First case, the red line indicates your capacity, right? Red line indicates capacity, right? One cloud service provider has given this much resources to you to deploy your applications, and this is your demand. Your demand is equal to capacity here at this point, and this point, right? Where demand is equal to capacity. It is okay. But what about this area, this shaded area? In this case, whatever your demand is very low, but cloud service provider is giving high amount of resources. So what will happen? So it will lead to the problem, right? It will lead to provisioning problem, right? That we call as heavy wastage of resources in over provisioning. This is over provisioning. You are giving more resources, but cloud service provider is unable to do it, right? Second one, come to here. Your capacity is this one. You need this much. Okay, sir. The cloud service provider has provided this much of resources, but sometimes you require more, right? Sometimes you require more, or sometimes you require less, right? So in this case, what happened? Your demand is more, but capacity is less. So it is lead to your under provisioning of the resources, because whatever resources are provided, it is not sufficient during this particular time, or during this particular time, or during this particular time. Similarly, if you see in this diagram here, if you see, it is also a specific case of under provisioning, because capacity is this much, but you require more. In this case, it is little bit more, but in this case, your capacity is equal to demand. If capacity is equal to demand, then you can say that is called as a constant provision. Okay. So now I'll launch one poll. So please answer my question. First question. Please answer this question within 30 minutes, 30 seconds. CAS stands for DES, communication as a service, computation as a service, computer as a service, cloud as a service. Let us stop the poll. What is the correct answer? What is the correct answer? Most of people you have answered incorrectly.
Communication as a service.
Communication as a service. I told you communication, network, and hardware. These three layers are added in this particular architecture in comparison to your previous three, like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Okay. So now coming to this resource provisioning, now you know what is over provisioning, what is under provisioning, and constant provisioning. So there are three resource provisioning methods, right? We'll go in detail with respect to these provisioning. One is called as demand driven, right? Demand driven is used in the grid computing. This concept is not new. It is used in the grid computing. So it provides static resources. Static resources means if you have 100 servers, so you have to assume that everything you have to manage with 100 server only. If somebody require more, then you can say that your request is rejected. Second one is called as event driven. Event driven, you have to predict the workload with respect to time, right? With respect to a particular time, you have to predict what is your load, right? Third one is called as your popularity driven. Popularity driven says that you have to see the internet traffic, okay, whether people are searching this particular website or not. So based upon that, you have to provision the resources. So come to the details about this demand driven. So if you see here, there are three curves, right? One is called as your demand driven, right? Second one is your event driven. Third one is called as your popularity driven, right? And there is two lines. One is red lines. Red line indicates your CPU load, okay? How much load your CPU is taking. And these black lines indicate the number of nodes, right? There is a black line here, if you see, right? This black line indicates the number of nodes. So in this experiment, this is experimentation conducted by various researchers, right, in University of Southern, right, California. So they have taken the number of nodes as 20. As you can see, number of nodes is 20. Time is from 1 to 134 millisecond. Okay. And here they have taken the CPU utilization. With respect to a particular time, what is the CPU utilization? So see here, they have taken 20 nodes. Total number of nodes they have considered 20. So the utilization should be averaged. So if you see, there is a heavy fluctuation here. In this part, if you see, there is a heavy fluctuation. But after that, there is a fluctuation, but there is no heavy fluctuation. Similarly, whenever you are coming to the event driven also, what happened? Initially, the fluctuation is very high. The fluctuation is very high, right? After that, there is something stable, right? But in this case, in the popularity driven, the fluctuation is minimized in comparison to your demand driven and event driven. So let us see details about these things. So demand, what you can do, you can add and remove resources as and when required. For example, suppose you are using a single server and the server's utilization is exceeding 80%, right? So you think that after some time it may reach to 100%. So immediately you have to start another server. That is called as adding of the resources, right? So once you cross a particular threshold, that threshold is your, let's say 80%. So you can increase the resources. Similarly, you can say that if a resource, if a server's resources is going below 20%, okay, so this load should be migrated to some active server which is having a load of let's say 70%, so that these resources can be put in the switch off mode, right? So if there is a below threshold, you can decrease the resources. So this is called your demand driven approach, right? So as I also mentioned, if you see in the demand driven, so there is a heavy fluctuation in the beginning, right? So we have taken the x-axis in the millisecond. Okay, here we have taken the 20 virtual machines. Here we have taken the CPU utilization in the previous slide. And if you see, there is a heavy fluctuation, right? Now, coming to the event driven also you can add and remove resources with respect to a particular time. For example, you know, today is let's say Christmas time. You know that Christmas time people are celebrating and they are various online websites are launching offer. So you know that the number of users will increase in the Christmas, or number of user will increase in the New Year time. Okay, or number of user will increase in India context, let's say Durga Puja time or some Pongal time. These people are doing so many shopping. So at that time, by looking into that particular time period, we can increase the resources. Once the time period is over, we can decrease the resources, right? So that is called your event driven resource provisioning. But what will happen? What will happen? Wastage resources are even greater. The number of resources, whatever you are using, sometimes it may be going wastage, right? Why? Because if this time is not appropriate. For example, let's say you have taken the Durga Puja time, but Durga Puja time, let's say there is some issue happen, right? There is some issue happen, people are not interested to visit any website, right? So what will happen? If it is not following a particular pattern like Durga Puja or Christmas or New Year, then again the resource will be wasted, right? So come to internet basis, that is called as popularity driven. Popularity driven, what you will do? You have to anticipate the increased traffic with popularity. So you have to see the past data. By looking into the past data, you will say that whether today people will visit to a particular website or not, right? If your prediction is correct, then definitely yeah, you can provision the resources in a better way. But if your prediction failed, then what happens? Again, resource wastage will happen. So resource may be wasted if traffic does not occur as expected. Whatever you have expected in that way, if it is not happen, then it is difficult, right? But in this case, if you see the popularity driven in the last case, you are minimizing the loss of quality of services. Whatever services you want to provide to the customer, you are providing the services. The service is not compromised at any cost, right? So this is the advantages you are getting with respect to this popularity driven, and the last case is event driven. Now, in order to go for the resource deployment, right? Everyone require dynamic resource deployment, right? So for this, Professor Rajkumar Bhuiya, right, who is a very good researcher in cloud computing, right? So in Melbourne University, there is a group, right? In Melbourne University, Australia, they formed one group. That group is called as Intergrid Management Infrastructure. or it is called as IgG, that is called as Intergrid Gateway, IgG, right? And this platform, this infrastructure is developed in the Java using your Java programming languages. So what they did, right? IgG allocate the resources from a cluster to deploy application in 3 steps. So if you want to deploy any kind of virtual machines, okay, or deploy virtual machines in this IgG, so you have to follow 3 steps. First step is you have to request the virtual machines, right? In order to request the virtual machine, what you require? You may go for a template. As I mentioned, you can therefore a template. By using the template, you can request a particular virtual machine. Then they will approve the virtual machine. Each and every request is called as your lease. So they will approve your whatever you have requested based upon their availability of the resources. They are going to approve it, right? Once they will approve it, what you can do, you can now deploy your virtual machine as requested. Whatever virtual machine you have requested, that virtual machine you can deploy in this IgG infrastructure, okay, or intergrid managed infrastructure. As you know that the word intergrid means what happens? There is multiple grids are there, so they are interfaced, right? Grid 1 is interfaced, grid 2, okay, multiple grids are there, right? Like grid N is there, all are interfaced, right? So that they can combinedly solve a particular problem, right? So whenever there is a peak demand, when there is a resource requirement is very high, so what will happen? One grid will interact with another grid. That is, one IgG is interacting with another IgG in order to provide services to the customer, right? Now, IgG can also allocate resources from a cloud service provider. So, IgG can also interact. This is not limited to grid computing infrastructure. So, they may also connect, like there is a N grids are there. There may be some cloud service provider is also attached to this network. So, we can provide the resources from the cloud service provider as well, right? So if you want to go for this development, right? So Intergrid allocates and provides a distributed virtual environment, right? Because all the resources are not present in a single place. They are present in all over the world. They are present in the different place. That's why you have to create a virtual environment. And as the resources are not present in a single place, we call it by a distributed virtual environment, right? So anywhere you can execute your work, right? So in order to see which task will be executed in which location, right? Because all over the world there are so many data centers are there, right? Like in IgG also multiple things are there, right? So you should know that which user's work is executed in which location. For that we are using a DBE manager, that is called a distributed virtual environment manager. So it performs the resource allocation. For example, user 1 resource should be executed in, let's say, US server. User 2 is executed in, let's say, Europe server, right? Like that, you have to allocate the resources and manage these resources, right? Whether the resource is active or not, whether the resource is over provisioned, whether the services is under provisioned, everything you should take care, right? Next is the main core component. If you go for this complete architecture, this environment, what is the core component? Core component is always the scheduler, because scheduler dispatches the work from one place to another place. As you have seen in the operating system also, it is moving from one place to another place, right? So implementing provisioning policies and peering with other gateways, in collaborating with other gateways, right? You are not only executing your work, sometimes you are collaborating with others, right? So this peering work will be done with other gateways by the help of the scheduler, right? I'll tell you one diagram. I'll show you one diagram so that the idea is more clear. See this diagram. There is a IgG here. Okay, there is a IgG in this part, right? There is another IgG here, right? So these two IgGs are interfaced here, right? And what are the three operations you can apply? As I mentioned, you will request the virtual machine by looking it by taking a particular VM template. Then we will check that whether the resources can be provisioned or not by enactment of the leases. Once we will approve, then you can deploy your application in the physical resources by creating the virtual machines, right? And if you see, every IgG has a virtual infrastructure engine that is called as VI. See here, this IgG also contain a VI. So this VI is nothing but the software, right? That is nothing but, there is no person, right? It is nothing but a cloud API, right? In order to manage everything in the cloud infrastructure or in the IGG infrastructure or any organization sites, we are using DI. So in this way, a user application can be deployed in the physical resources or cloud service provider. Now, so what is the practical example? If you see one of the practical example, we are using, I am referring repeatedly, that is our email system, right? If you see email system, total number of users are in millions, right? Millions of users are accessing the email system at the same time, right? And each user is having so many emails, let's say thousands of emails. So imagine thousands of email and millions of users. Okay, the total number of space, if you see, it is consuming multiple gigabytes of disk space, right? And it is stored in the data center. So imagine how much resource, how much storage is required to store thousands of email per user if it is thousands in thousands into million of users. So this is a practical application where we can see how we are provisioning the storage resources, right? Similarly, another application, every people are searching in Google, right? All people are searching in Google. Any new word if you want to know, or any synonym, antonym, you know, you are searching in the Google, right? So this web searching application is also one of the important factor, okay, or important example, you can say, whenever we are talking about a distributed virtual environment, right? So how Amazon is providing? Amazon is providing S3. I will tell you in the one lab class. I will tell you about S3, that is Simple Storage Service Cloud. Okay, this Simple Storage Service Amazon S3 is providing by using SOAP protocol. That is Simple Object Access Protocol. Because whatever object you are creating in Amazon S3, that is an object-oriented protocol by following your SOAP protocol. In this way, Amazon is providing resources to the customers. Now, if you come to the storage system, right? What you need in this, whether it is a email system or a web searching system, what you need? You need high amount of storage, right? Big amount of storage, right? Large amount or massive amount of storage, you can say. So what you can do? You can use these three systems. One is you can use Google File System, GFS, very popular. It is having features that very large sustainable reading and writing bandwidth. If bandwidth is high, then you can read and write your data in a very faster manner, right? So GFS is one of the storage system, and Google also launched a open source one. Open source one is called as your HDFS. So this HDFS is nothing but the open source clone copy of your GFS. So this is not open source, but this is your complete open source. It is written in Java. This HDFS system you can use to store data, or you can use Amazon S3, right? Simple storage service, or Elastic Block Store can be used in the Amazon S3 to store massive data like email applications or web searching applications you can use. So yes, as I mentioned, Google File System stores your web data. Whatever the applications are you are using, like Google Map you are using, Google Docs you are using, Google Drive you are using, right? And Google Assistance you are using, Google Translator you are using. Everything is stored in the Google File System. So it is a geographic data for your Google Earth, right? And if you want to use this Google File System, Google also links to your HDFS system. It is a completely open source system of Google Cloud you can use. Similarly, Microsoft also, like Amazon is using S3 and your EBS thing, and Microsoft is using Cosmos, right? So these are used for to storage massive amount of data in the data center, right? So what kind of data you can store? That is very much important. The data may be a structured data or maybe a semi-structured data. Like you know that if you go for a Microsoft Excel file, okay, in Microsoft Excel file, suppose you will click in a particular element, right? Suppose you will click here, right? A particular element. So that particular element is belongs to a particular column or belongs to a particular row. So this data is called as structured data. So if the data is structured, then you can easily analyze you can apply data analytics into the data, right? You can easily analyze anything. But if you go for real life data is not structured. Real life data is either semi-structured or unstructured data. Semi-structured data is one of the example of semi-structured data is your HTML. So you know that they are using HTML by using your HTML tag or class HTML tag, right? But whatever things you are writing in a HTML file, all files may not have that commands, right? For example, you want to create table you can use TD, right? But if you don't want to use table in a particular HTML file, then you will not use, right? So such data are somehow structured. So that is called as a semi-structured data. But whenever you go for Facebook data or you go for your Microsoft Word files, everything, if you see, the data is completely unstructured data, right? But if the data is structured or semi-structured, it is easy to use and you can build the applications by using your application developer, right? But if the data is completely unstructured, then it is very difficult to analyze such data. So you have to convert the unstructured data to semi-structured or structured form in order to analyze the data in a proper fashion. So again, Melbourne Research Group also uses one of the important part, that is called they called as by French grid 5000 system, right? So they illustrate this French grid 5000 system illustrate the VM creation and management. So by looking into this grid 5000 system, you can illustrate the VM creation and management. And they also reveal, this research group also reveals what are the issues with respect to a particular virtual machine. So if you are creating a virtual machine or managing a virtual machine, what kind of issues you will face, right? So that issues I will tell you in the next slides, right? So if the services, whatever services users require, if the services are independent, if the services, whatever service you are requiring and whatever service I am requiring, if both are different, then there is no problem, because your task is completely unrelated with my task, right? So I can execute multiple tasks at the same time, right? Like if you go for Amazon SQS, that is simple queue services, it provides the reliable communication between any two communications, right? Between different providers or between different processes, it is providing a reliable communication, right? But they have revealed, this Melbourne Research Group they have revealed some of the important causes that I will tell you. Like here you can see they have used a grid 5000 system. They have taken 9 different sub-cities. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Another city they have counted. I will tell you in the next figure. So they have taken 9 cities to done a particular simulation, right? So what they are assessing? They are assessing this BM manager. Why BM manager is used? BM manager is managing the virtual machine. Whether, and they are using Amazon EC2 instances. Okay, whether it is a micro instance, maybe a small instance, maybe extra large instance, right? So they are creating the Amazon EC2 instances and they are providing services to the customer. So how a VM template look like? I will, before going to before discussing that part, see here there is a template directory is here, right? Template directory, what it indicates? It says that one template is there which is running in the Ubuntu system, Linux system, having one core and its size is 120 megabytes. Another system is there, another Linux system is there, Fedora, having 2 core with 256 megabytes. Another template is there, that is OpenSUSE, that is 1 core with 512 megabytes. So such types of templates are there. These templates you can use in order to deploy your virtual machine on top of the physical machines, right? So obviously here they are using some third-party applications, right? Like in between you and cloud service provider, there is a web browser, right? Like Google Chrome, Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, Internet Explorer, right? So these are the various applications you have to use, third-party applications you have to use in order to go for cloud, in order to access the cloud. So for this, who is going to help you? Web 2.0 forms, right? Will help you to provide interactive application with Ajax, right? Like we are using web browser, as I told you, a web browser is a third-party applications we are using in between the end user and the cloud service provider. But whenever you are going for a cloud service provider, all the cloud service provider may not rely on a particular web browser. They may have their own web browser to provide the services. Okay, or all the cloud service provider is not using third-party applications. They may use their own applications. Like if you see Google App Engine and Microsoft Azure using their own cloud APIs to provide or to get cloud services, right? They are not relying on any third-party applications because if you include third-party applications, there may be a security problem. So whenever you are going for IBM Blue Cloud uses WebSphere application engine. By using this, they can provide various services. But Amazon EC2, you can use any kind of application engine in order to access Amazon EC2. So this VM manager, whatever we discussed here, this VM manager, what is the role of this VM manager? This VM manager links the gateway with resources, right? Every IgG has a gateway. Okay, this integrate gateway is there. So it is linking the gateway with resources, whether it is a grid resources or a cloud resources. So it is linking the gateway with the resources, right? So the gateway relies on which platform? Virtualization technology. What is the virtualization technique? Either it may be VMware, it may be KVM, it may be your XCM, right? These you can use. And this VI, as I discussed, VI each IgG is having one VIE. Okay, so this VIE can create and stop virtual machine on the physical cluster. So VIE is managing your resources, and they can create and stop and virtual machine as and when required. Right? As I mentioned, XCN is used as a VMM in order to execute the work. Now coming to the VM template, what should the content of the VM template? In VM template, you have to mention how many cores you require. Suppose you want to deploy a particular application in the cloud, you have to take a VM template. If you are taking a VM template, if your cloud service provider is allowing a VM template, so you have to mention the number of cores or processor. You have to mention how much memory you require, right? You have to mention the kernel used to boot the virtual machine operating system, which kernel is required for your application. You have to mention your disk image containing the VM file system. Everything with respect to the VM file system is there in the disk image, that also you have to specify. And one of the important factor, you have to mention what is the price per hour, right? Whenever you are using services, you are going to pay for your services. So price per hour for using a virtual machine should be there in the VM template. So the VM template should contain these 5 things. Along with these 5 things, other things are also there. So these are the 5 things you should concentrate while you are using a VM template. So what the gateway administrator is doing? Gateway administrator is responsible for this VM template, and they provide the VM templates information. They are providing different VM templates. As I mentioned here also, there are 3 templates. One is Ubuntu, one is Fedora, another is OpenSUSE. Okay, so these are the templates available. One of the template you have to use. Now, coming to your XCN or KVM or KVM or XCN or your VMware, that is called your virtual machine monitor. Virtual machine monitor generates a descriptor for the template. So how a descriptor look like? Descriptor contains all the information of VM template. So here, whatever things we have discussed regarding VM template, everything should be there in the descriptor contents, plus some additional information like disk image. As we discussed, disk image is also required. This disk image containing the virtual machine or file system, that is required. Address of the physical machine, right? Which physical machine is holding your virtual machine? You know that one physical machine can hold multiple virtual machines, right? That also you have to mention in the descriptor. You have to also mention the VM's network configuration, and you have to also mention the required information for deployment of a infrastructure as a service provider, right? So VMM keeps these things, or keeps a descriptor contains these things, so that they can monitor the virtual machine, and they can create and they can see the status, they can stop the virtual machine, and they can do any kind of operation in the virtual machine. Okay, so before starting an instances, suppose I want to deploy an application in the VM. So VM is clear, right? VM part is clear, right? Now, if you want to deploy an application in the cloud, so what you have to do? So before starting an instances, the scheduler gives the network configuration and host address, because your physical machine is present in some other locations. You are creating the virtual machine. You are deploying the virtual machine in the physical machine, right? So you have to mention the network configuration. So what is the network configuration? You know that each and every physical machine is having a MAC address. Your computer is also having a MAC address. So in order to access a particular computer system, you require your IP address, right? By using this IP address, you can reach to a particular provider, right? A particular resources, so that you can deploy your virtual machines, right? So to deploy several instances, for example, I want to create 5 virtual machines, right? So I can use the same VM template, right? I want to create same type of 5 virtual machines. So I can use several instances of the same VM template and use the resources, right? That's why if you go for Amazon EC2, as an example of Amazon EC2, Amazon EC2 assigns the public IP to the instances. So whatever EC2 instances are there, EC2 instances are given with a public IP address. So if a user is assigned with a public IP address for a particular virtual machine, so user can access that EC2 instances, right? And IgG works with a repository of VM templates, right? It consists of a set of VM templates that is called as VM template directory, as we have seen in this particular diagram. Here we are using a set of VM templates, and based upon our usage, we can use one type of virtual machine template. Okay. The next one is if you are using distributed VM management or VIE or distributed virtual machine environment. So there is an interaction between the different IgG. As I already shown in one diagram, one IgG is interacting with IgG because one IgG may face scarcity of the resources. The resources, whatever required for a single IgG, may not be sufficient to provide the services to many users. That's why one IgG need to communicate with another IgG. So how they are communicating? They are communicating by the help of distributed VM manager, right? So this distributed VM manager having list of requested VMs from gateway, right? It is containing a set of list of requested virtual machine. Which virtual machine is using which IgG? If multiple IgG is there, whether it is using in IgG1 or IgG2 or IgG3, everything will be taken care by this distributed VM manager, right? So they are maintaining public IP with respect to private IP also, right? They are taking the pair of public IP and private IP for each virtual machine by using this SSH tunnel, right? So this is the responsibility of distributed virtual machine manager in order to map the public IP with the private IP, right? Then user is specifying the VM template. User can specify the VM template. In VM template, they can specify the number of VM instance required. If any deadline is there, if you need the resources by 5 PM, you have to specify. While time also you need to specify, or address of the alternate gateway. If first gateway is not sufficient, next which gateway need to be used, that also you need to specify, right? So each gateway scheduler uses the backfilling algorithm. There is a backfilling algorithm. I'll tell you later. Conservative backfilling algorithm to schedule the request. So this is the site. You can see, as I mentioned here, if you see how many sites are there, total site is 3, here another 3, here another 3, right? So total 9 sites are there, right, in grid 5000. In total number of ports, if you see, that is having 4792 process of ports are there, right? So whenever a user is requesting on resources, right, it will go to a particular node. If the resource is not sufficient, then it may request the resources to some other node. Like you can see, Sophia is a particular site, right? Out of 9 sites, this is having 568 ports. If the resource is not sufficient, it may request this ORSE, right? This is an interaction between the Sophia with ORSE. So that is called a two gateway communication, right? So they may not be directly related. They may not be directly linked between. There may not be a direct link like this. So but they can communicate each other and they can share resources like that. C gateway may happen. Sophia may connect with Nancy or maybe connected with Rennes, right, and share the resources. Or Sophia may connect with Nancy or Rennes, or it may communicate with Orse, right, and they can share the resources. They can accommodate multiple users, right? So this is a practical application used by Melbourne University people. Melbourne University Research Group has designed this particular applications. Okay. So now, what kind of things you can do, right? See, what kind of what these sites can do. These sites can share the resources in 4 modes. First mode is called as load without peering. Load without peering means you will not share your load with any other person, right? Whatever load is given to you, you should not share your load with others. So if you see in the first diagram is containing load without peering. So if you see the load of some machine is very low, the load of this particular Rennes is very high, right? They are not sharing any load. Second one is load when peering. The second one indicates load with peering. So here the second one indicates load with peering. So if the resources require is more, then you can take help of other sites as well. Suppose you don't have any resources, sufficient resources, you can request to some other cloud service provider. But whenever you are requesting to other cloud service provider, make sure that that cloud service provider is not overloaded. That's why there is two things is coming into picture, whether the load is accepted or the load is rejected. Suppose here the load is more, as you see in this bar graph. So this Rennes load is more. What Rennes will do? Rennes will propagate the load to here, okay, because here this load is very low, or it may propagate this load to here. Okay. So whenever it is requesting with these two sides, so whether they are accepting the request or not, right? So here, if you see in the Rene case, they are not accepting the request. Rene is not going to accept any request because its load is very high, right? Similarly, load redirected. How much load is redirected from one provider to another provider? For example, Rene propagate, redirect the load to other cloud service provider in a high amount, right? Maximum load is given to the Renes that will be redirected to some other cloud service provider. So this is a graph you can use. So global exchange of cloud resources, if you see, if you go for Amazon cloud, all cloud service provider may not have data center in all over the world. This is a very important point I am telling you, right? So what if you concentrate in a particular cloud service provider, it may not have data center in all over the world, right? It may not have, right? Like if you see Amazon case, Amazon has two data center in the east region of United States, another west region of the United States and Europe. Amazon may not have data center in a country also. So what it will do? It will see that which provider has a data center in that country. So it will collaborate with that cloud service provider so that it can provide services to that country people, right? For example, let's say India, let's say one server is not there for a particular company, right? But Amazon is having that data center in India. So that company may approach Amazon that we don't have a data center in India, so you can take the load of India and propagate the services. So that require inter-cloud collaboration, right? So express a preference. Sometimes cloud service providers are also asking in which region you want to deploy your application. Like whenever you are using Amazon EC2, they will specify whether you want to deploy in US West region or US East region or in Europe region, right? That also you can provide because all the cloud providers does not provide seamless mechanism for scaling its hosted services across multiple data centers. So all cloud service providers may not allow you to use all the data center to store or deploy any kind of services. So what is the shortcomings in this approach? User may not be aware that which location is best for me. For example, India, I want to deploy something in Amazon, right? I may not be aware that which location is best for me. So that is a problem. Second one is US expectation also may not meet because I don't know if I use US West server or US East server or Europe server, which server is best for me. So what I have to do that no single cloud infrastructure provider will be able to establish the data center at all possible locations. So they need to collaborate each other. That's why we require inter-cloud resource management in order to provide the services, right? Like University of Melbourne people also developed one project that is called as a cloud bus project. That is similar to your architecture as your inter-cloud architecture or IGG. I told you about inter-IGG architecture, and they are providing the services in multiple clouds, right? Like I told you, Amazon has no data center, then it may ask Microsoft. Microsoft has no data center, it may ask IBM. So that combinedly they can provide the services. That is multiple cloud infrastructure service provider, right? You are requesting to a single cloud service provider. You are requesting to a single CSP. But if that CSP may not provide the service, that CSP may contact other CSP so that the services will be provided by that cloud service provider. That is the advantages you will get. So here you have to negotiate between the SLA because one cloud service provider service level agreement may not be same as other cloud service providers service level agreement. So that problem you may face whenever you are going for inter-cloud resource management. And client brokering and coordinating service is also important. You have to decide which which cloud service, which services you will provide, which services other cloud service provider will provide. Okay, that is very much important. So this overall thing is given in this broker, right? A user is asking the resources. Okay, so that may go for a set of brokers, right? There are set of brokers are there. Maybe broker one is handling Amazon, broker two is handling your IBM, broker three is handling, let's say, Microsoft. Okay, so whenever the enterprise resource managers are there, they are connected through proxy. Okay, so various compute clouds are participating. For example, Amazon is participating, let's say, other cloud service provider which is providing a compute cloud and storage cloud, they are also providing the services. So all are interfaced to the broker. So broker will decide which cloud which users work will be executed in which cloud service provider. So this is the complete picture of the inter cloud resource management. where you will not rely in a single cloud service provider. You can render the services of multiple cloud service providers. So in the next class, we will see the